After an exhausting 18-hour surgery to repair catastrophic internal injuries, the medical team stopped their efforts. Eamon's heart had ceased beating. The trauma doctor noted the time, officially called the time of death, and pulled the hospital sheet over Eamon's face. As the doctor turned to leave the room and notify the family, a sound stopped him. The heart monitor above the surgical field registered a pulse. Beep, beep, beep. Eamon survived the operating table, but the machines could only restore his pulse. Long before his heart failed in that London hospital, he had been living in a state of spiritual death. His physical recovery was only the final stage of an internal return to life. Eamon arrived in London as a young Iraqi refugee shortly after the September 11th attacks. He was immediately dropped into a hostile political environment, where he faced public alienation and suspicion as a newcomer in a city on edge. Because he couldn't speak English, he became a constant target for bullying. By 14, the relentless attacks drove him to adopt a defensive, violent posture. He decided if he was going to be treated as a threat, he would become one. He spent his teenage years in the middle of London's housing estate gang wars. Trapped between rival territories, he faced constant violence and retaliation, eventually cycling through the prison system as the street life claimed his youth. Violence provided a temporary shield on the street, but it also locked him into a cycle of retaliation. The very mechanisms he used to stay alive were the same ones hollowed out his sense of peace. The turning point came during a prison visit a year into his sentence. Eamon watched through a glass window as his mother, a devout woman of faith, was subjected to aggressive security searches by prison guards just to see him. The glass prevented him from even holding her hand or asking for her forgiveness. Realizing that his choices had dragged his mother into a criminal environment she didn't belong in, Eamon experienced a profound sense of shame. Back in his cell, Eamon performed tawbah, sincere, silent repentance. He offered 2 units of prayer, surrendering his pride and vowing to Allah to leave the streets and become the son his parents deserved. When he was finally released, Eamon kept that vow. He went straight from the probation office to his family's home, surprising his parents after their Friday prayers with a celebratory meal of okra and stuffed grape leaves. Real change began here, not with a grand gesture, but with the quiet weight of knowing he was still the good boy his parents raised, even if he had spent years forgetting how to say no to the wrong people. But the righteous path didn't protect Eamon from his past. Months after his release, he ran into an old friend on the street. After a brief conversation, Eamon turned to walk away, and the man stabbed him violently in the back. The blade used was designed for maximum damage. It was lined with small spikes. It entered smoothly, but hooked and tore his internal organs as it was pulled back out, leaving Eamon to collapse on a shop floor, pleading for an ambulance. During an 18-hour surgery, Eamon's heart stopped. The hospital's defibrillator failed to restore his rhythm, and the surgical team prepared to call his time of death. The surgeon later remarked that in 40 years of medicine, he had never seen a heart restart on its own after the equipment failed. For Eamon, this moment confirmed that his survival remained entirely in the hands of the divine. Waking up from a 9-day coma, Eamon found himself in a new reality. He discovered a stoma bag permanently attached to his stomach, a physical reminder that his body would never function the same way again. The trauma continued. Later, a kidnapping by former enemies resulted in the removal of his bowel intestines. This left him in a state of chronic 24/7 pain, a physical burden he hides behind humor and prayer. Perhaps the most painful consequence was the doctor's news that the internal damage was so severe he would never be able to biologically father his own children. Survival meant moving forward as a different person. It required the spiritual strength to accept these permanent, agonizing limitations and still find a reason to be grateful. Iman knew exactly who had stabbed him. He knew their homes, their cars, and their routines. In his old life, this knowledge would have been the blueprint for a perfect revenge. Instead, he chose the radical path of his faith. He walked away from vengeance entirely, deciding that true justice belonged to Allah, and that his new life was too valuable to waste on a grudge. This commitment to peace created a bridge where none existed. One of the very men who once tried to kill Iman eventually contacted him after finding the faith himself. Because they now shared a common creed, they were able to bury years of violence and meet as brothers, praying shoulder to shoulder. Forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate display of the spiritual discipline required to break a generational cycle of bloodshed. Iman found purpose in his own home. He married a woman who already had a child, viewing the opportunity to be a father to that child as a gift from Allah that replaced what he had lost. In 2022, he lost his greatest spiritual anchor. His mother passed away while performing the Umrah pilgrimage in Mecca, finding her final resting place in the holiest city in the Islamic world. She later appeared in Iman's dream, a figure of light asking if he had forgotten her. He took it as a permanent command to keep her memory alive through his prayers and his actions. Repentance and faith allowed Iman to find a life worth living, even within a body that never fully healed. A beating heart keeps a person in this world, but Eamon found that it is a sincere connection with the divine that allows them to survive it.